thousands, like 4,500 civilians were killed. And when they got a ton of international backlash for that and condemnation, instead of acknowledging that they did something bad or admitting that what they were even doing was wrong, even considering that what they were doing was wrong, instead they determined that really the issue was it was just a PR nightmare, and that was the issue. So in the aftermath of this, Israel establishes permanent institutional structures to influence how the U.S. views the Middle East generally. And in 1983, a year later, Israel launches their Hezbollah project. And something I noted in a separate video from a different interview with Noam Chomsky, Israel has two words for propaganda. 60 years ago, they had one word, which was timula, which is tamula. That's the propaganda of other people. That's the standard, universally understood idea of propaganda. Hasbara, which is part of this PR project, is explanation. The idea being that everything we do is so obviously correct that all we have to do is explain it to the goem. I don't know what goem is. I think it's another Hebrew word. But the idea just being they can explain it away. So Hezbollah project. The goal, the objective, again, documents in writing. Goal is to ensure good press in the U.S. media, in Western media. I've noted here some of the supporting evidence coming up here comes from an article, Confessions of an Israeli Press Officer. And so in this project, they began training information officers to present Israel's case to TV anchormen around the world. They trained press officers and Israeli consulates in the U.S. to ensure American journalists would write stories favorable to Israel. And in that article, one of the consulates is quoted as saying, breakfast, lunch, and dinner with that a typical day was breakfast, lunch, and dinner with journalists. A typical day began with calls to producers and news and talk shows in this kind of spirit of joint formation of ideas. So literally, they're launching this PR, this PR campaign, and have consulates that were in the U.S., interacting with the U.S. media, getting fed directly information from the Israel government, and together with the anchors and producers and whatever, were forming joint ideas. And I had my separate note here. The press officers, as described in this, are so fucking Orwellian. Textbook Orwellian propaganda initiative. It's a scary Orwellian level. And then notably the lack of access to Palestinian officials and the lack of access to Palestinian officials, can't get a hold of them, coupled with this Israeli PR campaign and the Israeli occupation leaves almost no room for the Palestinian side of the story. So on top of, the Israel's government basically just being in our media's ear, there's nobody providing the Palestinian perspective. And underpinning this, and something that we need to be thinking about more and more, and I want to make sure that I capture, nobody in the media was questioning this. They weren't questioning the motives of the Israeli consulates. So one lesson to be learned is any country that's engaged actively in a pretty vicious conflict, if they're approaching you really excited to share the details about it, that should probably be a red flag. Or it should at least make you go, wow, we're getting all this great information from them and we have nothing from the other side. That's when, you have to do the work. Don't be lazy. Go and find the story, get that perspective. Maybe, in some cases, right, it's definitely not the case in this situation. Some cases, that silence might be intentional and they might be the bad guys. But you have to get that perspective. So then we get into really interesting piece of this, a really, really important one, and I think is definitely influenced by Noam Chomsky, who was in this documentary. I'm going to flash it. I know it's chicken scratch, but I want to make sure that I capture it. It just, who knows? So this is the propaganda filters. This is something that Chomsky has written about in Manufacturing Consent. In this case, they do a nice job of tailoring the filters to this conflict in particular. But just like in Manufacturing Consent, there are layers to it. It's like kind of a progression. So same as in Manufacturing Consent, the owners of the U.S. media are the first filter. They always are. They dictate what gets aired and the behind-the-scenes stuff. The second filter, also involved in the Manufacturing Consent version of the propaganda filters, is the political elites. When I say it like that, right, I know that from my perspective, when I used to hear this, people talking about the political elites or the elites, right, you just kind of dude, what are you saying? The idea is more subtle in terms of the filter. It's the idea of as a media organization reaching out to the people that they deem the experts in this, who are the political leaders dealing with this conflict, and calling the shots, making the decisions, right? Going to them